So I'm here today to talk about science, technology, engineering, and math, and how that affects, or how that plays a role in making cancer history. But in order to do that, we must first understand where cancer came from and our knowledge of cancer. It all started back in ancient Egypt, when we had our first documented case of breast cancer. It was documented by this guy. His name is Imhotep. He's actually an architect, a medicine man, a high priest, and a vizier in Pharaoh's cabinet. A pretty multitasking individual, but he still looks stiff to me. The scroll that you see on the bottom of the screen is actually his own writings. It was describing a breast tumor that he had examined from a cadaver. It was the most detailed clinical description of cancer that we have in the history of mankind. It took another 2,000 years before we see our next documented case of breast cancer. It happened with a Persian queen, and that's not a disco song. Her name was actually Atossa, and she was the daughter of a king and the wife of a future king. She was suffering from a bleeding breast cancer tumor, and her slave, who was a Greek gentleman by the name of Democedes, talked her into performing a surgical operation on her and excising that tumor. She finally agreed, and although the literature stops mentioning her name after that incident, we do know that she did survive that procedure, because from her lifespan she survived quite a long time. The next encounter that we have historically was also with breast cancer. A French surgeon by the name of Bernard Pérollet actually documented his surgical experiences with breast cancer. And he was also performing lumpectomies, and that is excising the tumor that's sitting inside the breast. But he also documented the outcomes of his surgeries. And what was interesting to him is that the cancer always tended to come back, and it came back right around the edges of the tumor that he excised. He documented his findings, and later on, another surgeon, Dr. Halsted, innovated a procedure that is later known as a radical mastectomy. And in his theory, he felt that we needed to take the cancer from its roots. So he felt, in his theory, he theorized that we must excise the tumor from its roots. So he took the approach of taking the entire organ, the breast organ, and in addition, also taking tissue that surrounded the organs, that included soft muscular tissues behind the breast, as well as the lymph nodes that were under the clavicle. Needless to say, it was a very, very difficult procedure that only became possible after the invention of anesthesia. Wilhelm Röntgen, he was a German physicist who actually was exploring how to make electrons jump between cathodes and anodes in a vacuum tube. His experiments required his lab to be darkened, so no lights in his lab. Accidentally, he had a plate, a screen plate that was laced with a compound called barium. And that screen was sitting on the side for another experiment that had nothing to do with this one. And as he powered up the tube, the vacuum tube, to make electrons jump between cathodes and anodes, he noticed that that barium-laced screen was glowing like a fluorescent light. He repeated the experiment several times, and he concluded that there's actually invisible rays that are coming out of the tube and hitting the barium and making it fluorescent. He therefore discovered what is now known as X-rays. He then started playing with X-rays, asking his wife to place her hand right in front of the barium screen. And what you find here is the very first X-ray of a body part. And that was her hand, and what you see in front of you also is a ring that she was wearing. Now, of course, they did not realize the harmful effects of X-rays either. At the time, it was a huge leap in findings. It was the first time that physicians actually got to see the inside of the body without opening it up. That landed Wilhelm Röntgen the very first Nobel Prize in 1901. His discovery was in 1895, so only 6 years after his discovery, he earned the very first Nobel Prize. Around the same time, a French couple, Marie and Pierre Curie, were also experimenting with salts, mineral salts, that they discovered to be radioactive, emitting the same type of radiation that Willem Röntgen had discovered from his tube. Their discovery then led them to look into other elements that were naturally radioactive. So they discovered polonium and radium. They too won the Nobel Prize, and they also, Marie Curie actually won the Nobel Prize with her husband in 1903, and then she won a second Nobel Prize in 1911, and then her daughter also won the Nobel Prize in 1938. So she was the only person who won the prize twice, married to a person who won the prize, and her daughter also won the prize. They were experimenting with these radioactive materials, radium being one of them. The next picture that you see here is a picture of Emil. He's a scientist from Chicago, Emil Grube. He's a scientist from Chicago who took only 6 months after the invention of the X-ray tube by Willem Röntgen, he took that tube and started using it in Chicago. He built just a similar tube in Chicago. He noticed that his skin was peeling as he was firing up the tubes. So he realized that those tubes were actually harmful to cells in the human body. And then he thought, well, what if we use that energy to kill harmful cells in the body, such as cancer tumors? And therefore the birth of a new discipline called radiation therapy. The next person that we want to talk about is Henri Coutard. He's also a French scientist who came to Chicago to learn about radiation therapy. His theory was that if we use radiation therapy in a fractionated fashion, so instead of using one episode of radiation therapy on a tumor, we use multiple episodes over a period of time with less dose, we were able to kill a tumor without really harming the rest of the body. He was very successful, and his method is still being used today and called fractionated radiotherapy. Also, as a result of Marie Curie's discovery of radium, surgeons started to lace some metal rods with radium and implant them into tumors deep in the body. Because those big X-ray tubes could not penetrate the body, they needed a way to get to the tumor inside the body. So they were able to surgically implant metal rods that were laced with radium and kill the tumor inside the body. Hence the birth of the brachytherapy. The next person that we want to talk about is Paul Ehrlich. Paul Ehrlich is a German pathologist who was looking for a way that they can find abnormal cells and differentiate the way they look from normal cells. And he was the one who actually invented or discovered those dyes that you see on microscopic slides, highlighting the abnormal cells from the normal cells. He envisioned at one point that we will deliver, using such agents, toxins to tumors that would absorb that dye. And so the invention of what is now called the smart bomb against tumors. He never lived long enough to actually get there. But another physician, Sidney Farber in Boston, Massachusetts, was able to do so. He was actually a pediatric hematologist and pathologist in Boston. He worked at the Brigham Hospital in Boston. And what he did was he used a chemical that would attack cancer cells in a particular type of leukemia in pediatric patients called ALL. And he was able to treat pediatric patients with that chemical, hence the birth of chemotherapy, another discipline that we use today in oncology, the science of cancer. That is the birth of chemotherapy as we know it today. Here's an interesting story. This is a housewife and a mother. Her name was Mrs. Knott. She was grieving the death of her father. And so, as normal people would, they would go through the deceased person's belongings, right? And they would clean up their apartments and so on. She ran into a box of paperwork that her dad had kept for a longest time. Her dad was a surgeon. he noticed something in his patients. But because he was a surgeon, he really didn't explore that too much further. What he noticed is some of his cancer patients, when they got infected with another type of infection unrelated to their cancer, he noticed that the cancer actually tended to shrink during that time when the body was fighting the unrelated infection. But because he was a surgeon, it wasn't quite his discipline. Mrs. Knotts, his daughter, who was really passionate about what her dad was trying to accomplish, went ahead and studied immunology, oncology, and pathology, just trying to get to what her father was trying to accomplish. And she started an institute and employed one of the brightest minds to join that institute and explore the opportunity of using the body's own abilities, immune abilities, to fight cancers. Now, I've shown you a lot of black and white faded pictures. So you might say, what can we do today? And what you see now is a picture of Jim Allison. Jim Allison is an immunologist that works at MD Anderson, right in your backyard here in Houston. And what he was able to do is look at T cells, who are normally cells that normally fight infections in the body. He was able to take away inhibitors of the T cells and unleash them against the cancer tumors. This is a huge breakthrough, and indeed, he did win a prize, a breakthrough prize for his accomplishment in 2013, December 2013, not too long ago. And it happened in a lab right here around the corner. But cancer is a very difficult disease. In order to be successful at ending it, we must think beyond. We must think big thoughts. And so MD Anderson launched a program called the Moonshots. And the Moonshots are supposed to focus our resources to be great at killing a particular type of cancer, learn lessons from that, and then apply it to other cancers. And so we launched this program about 2 years ago. The cancer statistics are really huge, so a single institution cannot possibly tackle all these patients. In 2016 alone, we are expecting 1,685,000 of cancer in the United States alone. And we are also expecting 595,000 deaths due to cancer in the United States alone. So in order to get better at this, President Obama, in his last and final State of the Union address, his last one, he launched a cancer moonshot. And he tasked Vice President Joe Biden. Vice President Joe Biden has a personal history. His son, Beau Biden, actually passed away from cancer. So he has a personal stake in leading the charge. So taking that moonshot, looking into the horizons within, we're using chemistry. There's your nitrogen there. Biology, physics, medicine, engineering, and technology to look at this horrible disease, diagnose it early, and cure it. What you see here is a long way from the very first X-ray that you saw with Willem Röntgen. What you see here is a display of a PET-CT, a technology that actually looks at the body from inside out and highlights the cancer in that very bright lesion that you see in front of you. The next device that you see here is a linear accelerator. That is the device where we accelerate energy and bombard the tumor with it. We do it so precisely as to not impact healthy tissue around the tumor. Here's an example of different ways cancer can metastasize and how we can attack it. For those of you who are in Mr. Kunaz or Mr. E's robotics class, here's in front of you the hands of a surgeon who are controlling a giant robot capable of microsurgery that we can excise tumors in the human body in the most precise fashion using robotics. Here you see a magnetic resonance imaging, an MRI. This is a feat of engineering trying to marry both surgical oncology and diagnostic imaging. And what we do here is we allow the surgeon, as they operate, we allow them to know the exact precise location of where their knife is so that they can ablate the tumor very precisely. You can see the green line on the images coming into right where that black circle is. The black circle represents the tumor in the human brain. And the green line coming right into the crosshairs is where the surgical knife is coming in, ablating that tumor very precisely. We also need to tell the surgeon where to stay away from, not just the tumor to attack, but the places in the brain to avoid so that we don't handicap the patient. And what you see in front of you here is an actual image of neural tracts inside the human brain, the tracts that we're telling the surgeon to avoid as they're going in to ablate the tumor in the brain. And the next slide is going to show a video clip of those tracks, the way to attack them. So the surgeon actually sees that video and knows exactly what angle to take as they go into the brain to ablate the tumor and which areas to avoid. So it kind of provides them a pathway, a GPS of sorts inside the brain so they can get to the tumor. And this is the skin surface of the same patient that we're looking at with those fiducials on the head that gives us the coordinates of the tumors. So we use technology and advanced mathematics not just for the brain, but also for the way we operate. So what you see here is advanced mathematics that we use in order to improve our patient throughput. One of the most precious things that a cancer patient has is time, right? Time is very precious to a cancer patient. So the last thing that you want is have them wait in your waiting rooms for a scan. What you see in front of you is applying mathematics and computer simulation to look at how long it takes for patients to get from our door into our scanner and back out. And what we do here is we feed the computer the different data points that our patients arrive to different points in our operation, including our scanners. We have 3 hubs of scanners here, 1 hub at the bottom with 2 scanners, 1 hub at the top with another 2 scanners, and a 5th scanner on the right-hand side. As we study those data points, we're able to tell how we can move the patients faster and minimize their wait time. If we modify our scheduling times, instead of having 5 scanners open in the morning, 5 scanners opens in the middle of the day, 5 scanner open at the end of the day, if we modify our schedule just a little bit and open 4 scanners early in the morning, 3 scanners late in the morning, 4 scanners early in the afternoon, 3 scanners late in the afternoon, we only need 4 scanners, but then instead of having 2 scanners, 2 technologists per hubs, we use 3 technologists per hubs. That allows us to reduce the patient wait time, from 1 hour and 47 minutes, that without computer simulation, to what you see on the bottom of the slide. We reduced the number of scanners to 4 scanners, but now are using 3 technologists for every hub, and now we reduced wait time to 33 minutes. So we use advanced mathematics and computer simulations also in our operations. We're using science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, the very same things that you learn in the school here to fight cancer. So join us in our journey to make cancer history. Thank you.